Where do you see things now? How do you see things as they are now? What's happening in the world?
I see an outer world and an inner world. And I see a whole lot of paradoxes happening. Paradoxes that are so profound that people are actually seeing them. And for a while I was looking at the paradox of what's going on with this lockdown. And then it kind of flipped inside out. Like one of those pictures that you look at, but it's actually a different picture when you look at it long enough. Like a fractal thing. And it's sort of inverted. And rather than seeing that there's an evil government with an evil plan to turn everybody into not just wage slaves, but the battery power to run a machine. It's not just that we're enslaved by other humans, but what the technology people have been talking about for the last few years, describing the fourth industrial revolution, that it would be a technological world in which the artificial intelligence runs the human system. And suddenly with the COVID virus and the track and tracing and all that stuff, things that the fourth industrial revolutionists were saying would take 10 years to be fully implemented seem to suddenly fall into place immediately. And so that very much made it look like, hang on a minute, they must have devised this COVID-19 thing as a ruse with which to bring in all this technology and track and tracing and the Internet of Things and the 5G and every other thing. Changing the banking system and everything becoming digital instead of cash, and a total transformation of society like Agenda 2030 is talking about suddenly happened. Not going to happen over the next 10 years. It happened between one day and the next. Lockdown done. And what's really surprising about it is that everybody's done it voluntarily. Everyone. And they're doing it out of the kindness of their hearts because nobody wants to be killing the oldest and most vulnerable people in society by spreading a virus that's killing the oldest and most vulnerable people in society. But it's never been done before, and usually a flu just picks off the oldest and most vulnerable in society every year. It's always been that way. People who are kind of in bad health anyway, who catch a flu, often die from that flu. So in Britain that's like about 10,000 people a year, every year more or less, die in that way from the flu. And so it seems like things were exaggerated by the Centre for Disease Control and the World Health Organization. And in looking into it, the exaggeration came from a white paper produced by a university in London who have an institute there which runs a mega computer that runs simulations for pandemics. And so the information they put into that computer ran through its algorithms that are the best algorithms in the world for disease control. Based on the information they put in, they got information out of how bad the disease could be if you didn't do a lockdown. And it said half a million people in Britain would die if you didn't do a lockdown, and 2.25 million people in America would die if they didn't do a lockdown. And essentially that was the result from the AI telling the Boris and Trump, if you don't do a lockdown, despite the hassle to the economy, you're going to get blamed for all those deaths. So essentially you have to do it. And the same projection of a simulation from a computer program informed the CDC and the WHO to advise all countries to do the same thing. So they all did their own version of the lockdown. And everybody did it. Pretty much. And people did it not because the police were at their door, but because they just didn't want to piss off their neighbours and they didn't want to kill their neighbours. No, it's simplistic to explain anything, but roughly that's what I've seen. In my experience, people did it for the goodness of their hearts. For the good of other people. So then it turns into a thing of, okay, well, how serious is the disease really? Now that we've all locked in, and it seems the disease isn't so serious because we did the lockdown, and now we can start to unlock. But the unlocking is only a partial unlocking. You still can't go to beaches, but you can go to crowded places. It's a bit weird, but it's something like you can't socialise and you can't really be with nature, which is a bit strange. But overall, what clicked into place for me was just to look at it from the Earth Soul's point of view, that the Earth has a soul, that the Earth itself is a living being of a greater magnitude than us mere humans, and that Earth Soul has its agency. It's got its choice about what it allows to happen with its body and what it's willing to do and how far it's willing to take a procedure or whatever. And from there things pretty much unravelled for me, just to remember that the old prophecy stuff that us native nutters tend to remember from some unconscious spoken word oral history. And it's just an older idea than what the history books or education was teaching, and it's an inside-out view of what history teaches. And that view of things remembers there was a fall of Atlantis, kind of a myth in all cultures, where there was a flood, like Noah's flood, in all records. And the stories of those times is that the fall of Atlantis was because a section of people in Atlantis civilization were so deeply involved in technology and genetic engineering and stuff that they were doing things that were abhorrent to creation. But they got to a point where they tried to harness the tremendous energy of the earth itself as a weapon to control all the other people, and to harness the crystal energy of the earth in a computer system of some sort, and loads of technology and lasers and all this kind of nonsense. But whatever about the description of what they did in the past, there's no doubt that what was talked about in that myth is what we are now creating in our current world. So it's like the trauma that caused the fall has guided humanity to recreate the same trauma again. So we now face a thing where we've built so much technology on the planet that perhaps the planet is in a climate crisis, and if we don't change or resolve what we didn't resolve last time, then we'll do the same thing again. And there'll be a massive flood and civilization will be wiped out. And so from that perspective, I just tried looking at the COVID-19 lockdown from the point of view of Mother Earth. If she wanted to somehow get the message across to humans that if you want to stay living on this planet is going back to a natural frequency. It's not going to go ahead with some transhumanist mechanization of the whole of nature a financialization of the whole of nature, where these controlling manipulators that you mentioned get to continue controlling and manipulating until they have a one world government monopoly over everything through their monetary system, their law system and their army systems. I heard these two Australian guys explaining in a video what they'd learned from some Aborigines over in Australia, what their culture is and their holy people, what their interpretation of what's going on with God and love and nature. And they're saying by the winter solstice of 2020, these two different frequencies are going to finally separate. One set of frequencies is the earth itself and the earth soul, and anyone who's on board with the earth soul and has a relationship with the earth soul, those people will stay in the vibration of the earth soul. But all the other souls that are here on this planet, out of this almost 8 billion people, of all those other souls that are not resonating with the earth soul, they're resonating something else, their own human creations, their own alien creations, their own egos of their empire. And so I'd been looking at the internet over the last few years and wondering if what's going on with the internet is it's creating a virtual world for people who don't actually have any great interest in living on the earth as a means by which they can leave the earth, by imagining what it is that they want to live in and living in what they want to live in. And so the other question is God in all of this. We live in a very atheistic world citizen, global citizen, but it's very atheistic, the one world government. And plenty of people say it's satanic, but I'll just go with atheistic. It has a belief that the God concept is just a background, but really we are our own gods, and we can make ourselves in our own image, and we can improve ourselves with technology and pharmaceuticals, and nature is our beast. We can make it do anything we want. And so I've been wondering my whole adult life, and likely for a lot of past lives, how does this evil influence that's destroying nature, how does that evil get to leave the earth so that the earth can get on with its life without having that evil trying to devour it all the time? And this is what the Christian story talks about, to whatever degree that evil would leave the planet and good nature people could live, the meek could inherit the earth. The sweet people wouldn't be tortured by evil anymore. The good wouldn't be murdered for the profit of the bad. And so it's pretty unpopular to be your own version of Christian in this world, because the religious Christians don't really like what you're on about, and the people who rejected Christianity don't like what you're on about. Christ is a very triggering word, and therefore the idea of the Holy Spirit. So now with the COVID, what I'm seeing through the social media online is people aren't meeting up in person very much, and they're not chatting in the way they used to chat, but they are chatting online on threads. And there are threads going on about the COVID virus, what is it really, and the numbers, what are they really, and the right decision, what is it really, and should everybody stay in, who's allowed to work, when's this going to end, should we break the deadlock and just go out and spread, should we allow herd immunity? And all these conflicting views, or agreeing views. But it's like a sieve that's separating people out into their belief of whether they trust government or whether they absolutely distrust government. If the government says something, then it's a lie. If the media says something, then it must be the opposite. From the people who think if the media says it, then that's our mechanism for sharing information with ourselves. It's not out lying to us. So there's this sort of a war going on in people's minds with a conflict of beliefs. And those conflicts have always been there, but the war has been drawn out. on Facebook, on threads, it's written there for everyone to see what you actually said. It's not like having an argument in the pub and taking the piss. Everything's written down. It's going to be read by people in a few days' time, in a week's time, in a year's time. It's the Akashic records of what we think at the minute, all as humans. And so the thing that I'm seeing here is a conspiracy, but not ruled over by the cabal or the evil or the demon or the governments or the one-world government. They're just actors in a cosmic play, but it's Christ and God and Mother Earth who've written this play. And so there's no depopulation plan to get rid of loads of people so that you can make everyone else into slaves. That's not in God's plan or Mother Earth's plan. And yet David Icke is kind of suggesting that that's what's going on the Earth. And all the conspiracy theories are all based around somebody evil behind the scenes is taking control of the Earth, and we should spread fear. We should wake everybody up to the idea that something really terrible is going to happen and we're all going to have to fight for our lives and we're going to starve to death and billions of people are going to die. And I'm not really feeling that, and generally don't feel that, and when I wrote the fairy tale I felt the very opposite to that there's a way that everything does actually work out. Because God does exist, and God's function is to get everything to work out in the end. All along, for anyone who's got faith, all along, kind of thing. And so people with a wisdom tradition like that are just waiting. For hundreds and thousands of years we've been waiting for this thing to resolve, where people have stuff that needs to heal, needs for that stuff to come up to heal, and they need to heal it. It's not such a simple thing to just, a government can't make that happen. Anything less than God can't make that happen. Mother Earth on her own can't resolve the problem that's going on here on Earth. She of all people needs the creator of Earth to help her with what's happening in creation when it comes to the destruction of so much things that we humans are worried about. And so these concepts I was having before, they rang a bell with the Aborigines saying about this winter solstice, 2020, and that this year the choice between whether anyone actually wants to stay on Earth or whether they want to go and continue creating their own reality. But God and the Earth having agreed that there's an end date for being able to continue creating stuff on Earth that Earth doesn't want. But God is saying there's plenty of other places you can go. And my observation is, like, the population has increased from less than 1 billion people 100 years ago to over 7 billion people now, so that's like a tenfold increase in 100 years. So where have all these souls come from? From that point of view, it looks as if souls have come from all over the universe to Earth to be here for this present time, to experience a thing that's going on with the Earth at this particular time, where God is actually involved directly in what's going on. And where souls who've been stuck with pain and trauma and all kinds of shit that seems to have bubbled up in creation, that stuff can be resolved. Where the karmic hassle of having been murdered by somebody in a past life and all that stuff, or having been responsible for genocide in a past life and all that stuff, or being responsible for genocide in this lifetime and all that stuff. Somehow we need for all of that to be resolved in the universe. And what I'm seeing at the moment is that very thing resolving. Everybody gets to separate out and go wherever they want to go, which is whatever they are creating already. Everybody's already chosen. When I look around at myself or all the people that I know and wonder how many of us are still close to nature, at this stage in our lives in this lifetime. And I know I've spent an awful lot of time on the internet, and if I'm not careful, I'll spend the rest of my life on the internet. Which would be me living in a virtual world, not noticing that I'd lost contact with the earth. And so that's the thing that I'm seeing going on at the minute, is that anyone who's still listening to God in the present, not just the book and the religion and stuff, but God in the present inside of themselves. Anyone who's listening to the earth soul and their own soul and the God soul is feeling to get close to nature and to finish their business with anyone who isn't protecting nature or in love with nature or living in nature. So the people who don't want to be in cities anymore have been leaving cities and finding their place in nature, but COVID has really shook people up, and a lot of people are going to go to the countryside as far away from 5G and the Internet of Things and all the rest of it as they can, and also away from vaccines. So there's a mad scurrying around going on the planet with people moving from here to there whenever people are allowed to move. But that's the main thing that I'm saying, is just try running through the concepts that you have to explain what COVID is. Try replacing the idea of the government deciding what's going on with the devil deciding what's going on, and it being a terrible, terrible thing, a conspiracy that's going to wipe people out. And then consider whether the devil does exist and has the power to rape and pillage and imprison Mother Earth, and to defy the creator of the universe, that he can do whatever he wants and the creator of the universe can fuck off because he's got no power here. It's the devil's world. Consider whether that concept is true, or consider whether it's possible that the creator of the universe has an interest in what's going on in the earth. Mother Earth has an interest in what these humans are all doing here, and has sponsored for that many people to be here these days, and isn't expecting that everybody's going to stay here for the rest of eternity. She comprehends people are going to go on their journey. All these people who've come for this gathering are going to continue on to the next gathering or whatever it is they were doing, or back home or whatever.
So symbolically, COVID-19 is creating this lockdown where everyone goes into themselves.
Mm-hmm.
COVID-19 itself is, in its most extreme and frightening manifestation, is searching for breath.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to reclaim breath.
Mm-hmm.
So it's each person's opportunity, each person's opportunity to breathe into themselves and find out who they are, and to learn to breathe again.
But also to let go of all the false human stuff that humans are all doing that really doesn't serve anyone, that they don't really want to be doing, that everyone does, so everyone has to do it. It's dropping the mask. It's thinking about, who do I really love that I haven't seen, that I might never see again, that I would really like to see. And having the time to have those people pop into your mind and get in touch with them and discover that you're still friends and you'd like to meet up whenever the lockdown's over, and meet up in a field like in the old days before festivals, because this summer there's no festivals. And it's a load of soul work, you could call it, if you're a cosmic, but you don't have to be cosmic for this. This is just a natural thing that the Holy Spirit is organising, where everybody's getting in touch with everybody, that everybody needs to get in touch with people that you have had hassles with. You can now forgive those people, because none of it really matters. Holding grudges and all that stuff. Anyone who's not willing to let go of the grudges and face their own salvation let go of the shit that they're holding against other people and recognise they got themselves into shit, and we should all let go of it. But anyone who wants to maintain holding on to a grudge is essentially living in their own little virtual world where they're believing what they want to believe. And someone who's triggered into thinking you've insulted them, and you explain, no, I don't mean any insult. I said these words, I disagree with what you're saying, but I'm not insulting you at all. I don't mean it to sound like that, but the person is so vulnerable that they're taking offence at pretty much anyone they can take it with. Because their wound and their trauma is attracting somebody to trigger it. Because it needs healing, so it needs attention. So we're now in a phase where we can let go of all of that stuff, and if we can't let go of all that stuff, then we're building a little silo for ourselves in our own mind, where we feel inhibited to speak our mind or to go here or there or whatever, because our trauma is always getting strife. But the staying home does make us have to actually face whatever our own stuff is, because there's no one much outside to get away with wearing your mask and just mirroring stuff. And then the stuff that's actually locked down is all the social stuff that really was a load of waste of time. What's called recreational. Recreational spending money in places, just socialising and wasting your time doing fuck all, hanging out with other people kind of stuff. And that's all the stuff that's been locked down. And the kind of curfew off the streets. But I have taught things like perverts and rapists and all those people who feed off victims that they find out in the streets who are living a Western lifestyle, who are lost and drugged and drunk and fucked. And they're all victims of society sort of stuff, but they're not really on the streets at the moment. There's not really any vulnerable people walking the streets looking for company and not finding it because everyone's closed off. But on some level I'm just seeing anyway, like what does a paedophile or a pervert do if there are no victims to find out in the streets? Do they go mad? Do they see what's going on with themselves? And it comes back to, is there a God? Is salvation a realistic concept? If we're willing to believe all kinds of crazy conspiracy theories to try and explain what's going on, can we at least try a very, very, very old concept like the resurrection and the Holy Spirit? Saying something rather cosmic like, we've been kept in quarantine in a 3D world, but we are beyond 3D people, we do have soul. And in this quarantine 3D world we've been working out all this stuff that adds up to a one world government. If there's no God and if the devil rules the world, then we get a one world government and gates and vaccinations and all that happens, and you're allowed an hour outside a day for the next years. And you get a new vaccine every year because the viruses keep transmuting, changing, evolving, mutating. But the likes of Gates in that position isn't going to give up on the option of being able to give everybody an update every year for their virus protection, just like he does with his computer company. So that's what I'm seeing, is there's a choice really stark for people these days as to what world do they want to live in. And what are they willing to accept as a default if they don't create what they want. And the question would, are you creating what you want, or are you doing stuff that's against nature and against God's will? Are you happy doing that? Or do you want to stop? And what I like about the Aboriginal story that I heard these two Australians talking about is it puts an end date on the end of time. It puts an end date on the apocalypse. And that's just the same as the 2012 Mayan calendar just 8 years after that, the same sort of, yeah, this time it'll happen. But the understanding of it is very different now than it was 8 years ago. 8 years ago, we thought that everyone would transcend together, type of thing. That the world would all be changed from one day to the next, and we'd all be like 5D people or something. Whereas what this is suggesting is the Earth's resonance is going to rise up to a full power, higher frequency. Brighter resonance might be a better way of saying it. And anyone whose frequency rises with the Earth as she's rising up in that will have full choice to stay here. For anyone whose frequency isn't able to expand to that width, anyone's soul who can't grow with that transformation will jump off at whatever level they are comfortable at and continue creating whatever it is that they're creating. But it will be in some other planetary system, I suppose, if you want to try and put an analogy like that. Or some other realm, if you use a word like realm. But certainly whatever I'm seeing is very different to the idea of hell and damnation, and that the people who aren't Christians and don't follow Christ and don't blah-de-blah-de-blah, that they'll all burn in hell for the rest of eternity. It's much the same story, but a very different interpretation of what actually happens with souls in the mind of God. Kind of thing. I'm sure time will tell, won't it? Yeah, I'm happy enough to say this kind of thing just because it is just a different theory, and man, it's a much simpler theory in so many ways than the conspiracy stuff that everybody's lapping up these days that's causing such a conflict.
Well, the longer you sit with it and breathe with it and contemplate it, then the more sensible it is, the less and less far-fetched it is.
Mm-hmm. It's like every other bias. I mean, it was a familiar concept to me anyway. I just have a confirmation bias that I wasn't expecting. That's through which COVID and the lockdown is saying, hey, that answer you've known about for a long time, that is what's happening. All the other concepts, from David Icke and everyone else, all those other concepts don't really answer what's going on, but this one certainly does. That's my only comment on it. I'm not staking my reputation or my belief or faith in this, but it makes sense to me. It doesn't matter if I'm right or wrong. However, there's not much hope that's very valid around these days. This thing I'm talking about is a very hopeful idea.